This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
The podcast. Chris Graham and my co-host for this one on Friday is Jerry Carter, and we've got a lot to catch up on with Jerry. Of course, Jerry was in Maui last week. We'll talk about the conclusion of the Maui Invitational and that championship game, Duke and Gonzaga. Of course, we've got the ACC Big Ten Challenge to go through, basketball perspective. But I thought we'd start with football. Football's kind of coming to a close. We've got the bowl season still coming up, and we've got the ACC championship game this weekend. And then all the news in ACC football with some coaching moves. And maybe let's start there, Jerry. We could start with, I think we'll start with the North Carolina news. Quickly coming to a head with Larry Fedora being fired. That had been in the works, it seems like, been talked about for weeks leading up to the conclusion of the season. But then quickly North Carolina filling that job and going back to the past in an interesting way, going with Mack Brown, who, of course, was the coach at North Carolina for 10 years, 1988 through 1997, 10 seasons in Chapel Hill, before going to Texas and having a solid run there with a national championship in 2005, then kind of flaming out towards the end. Folks maybe were saying the game has passed him by, and 5 years later he's back, and he's at North Carolina. So, Jerry, I wanted to get your sense. This came out of left field for me. Any thoughts from you on this news, Mack Brown at North Carolina?
Well, Chris, of course, the national media went to the trifecta of going back to Arizona State with Herm Edwards, and then Kansas with Les Miles, and now North Carolina with Mack Brown. You have three people that have been there, done that, and are approaching retirement age. And I think Les Miles has a whole lot of coaching left in him, and I love Herm Edwards and his energy. Where Mack Brown is concerned, the thing I think he's fighting is the perception that at the end of his run in Texas, he just wasn't as aggressive as a coach. That maybe that he had lost touch. I think a great comparison would be when Joe Gibbs came back. Joe Gibbs was possibly one of the greatest coaches in the NFL. When he came back to the Redskins, it was a different game. The players were different. The mentality was different. And that's what worries me for Mack Brown is he has been away from the game for a few years. And then on top of that, the last time he was involved with the game, it wasn't on a high note. He didn't go out on quote unquote on his terms. Personally, I like Mack Brown, and I think that North Carolina was looking for a safe hire, somebody that's going to have name recognition. And I believe that they'll have that in Mack Brown. I think Mack Brown will run a clean program. I don't think he's going to do anything to embarrass the school. But you and I have talked all year about how tough it is to climb back up to the ACC. I'm not sure that Mack Brown can get that done in North Carolina.
You know what I found interesting too, when the news first popped up, the rumors were floating around, Mack Brown to UNC. You see this all the time when whatever school it might be, especially higher profile schools, Power 5 schools, you see it's kind of like it's not even like you assume that they're actual news stories, they're wish lists. Whoever the reporter is or columnist is writing the story will throw out the big name. In Virginia's cases, when the basketball coaching job came up about 10 years ago, nobody was thinking Tony Bennett. Everybody was talking about Tubby Smith as just one example of how that kind of thing works. And so, you throw the celebrity name out there, and then the coaching search goes where it needs to go, and then they hire who they decide to hire, and it's usually not the celebrity. It's almost always not the celebrity. And so when Mack Brown's name popped up, I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's what they're saying. But that's not really what's going to happen, right? I mean, Mack Brown's not really coming back to North Carolina. He's been away from the game, and he had the end of his run at Texas wasn't great, and then he hires him. They hire him, and part of the deal, it seemed like when the wish list columns were being thrown out there, well, he'll hire Gene Chizik to be his defensive coordinator, the former national championship winning coach at Auburn, and he'll hire Cliff Kingsbury to be his offensive coordinator, and Cliff Kingsbury was just let go by Texas Tech, and he's looked at as an up-and-coming coach, but he had a disappointing run at Texas Tech. Apparently now he's in the running to be the head coach at USC, so that tells you where people think of him, even being fired by Texas Tech. But, I guess I can look at this, Jerry, and say, okay, you're hiring Mac Brown to be the head coach, and in college football particularly, and NFL as well with a head coach, but especially in college football, you're the CEO of the program. Yeah, you're setting the tone, and your name is on the bottom line, but you're not out there, coaching guys on the line. You're not doing all the little things that your position coaches do, your coordinators do. A head coach needs to hire great assistants, a great coordinator on offense, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, position coaches, recruiting coordinator. His coaches need to be good recruiters. You're the CEO of a program, and I can see Mac Brown being a good CEO at North Carolina. He was a good CEO there before. He was a good CEO in Texas, and then the coordinators being important. But now that said, there's not a lot of positive energy, at least from the Carolina folks that I'm reading, the Carolina websites I'm reading. He's named former assistant coach at Texas, Greg Robinson, to be his co-defensive coordinator. Greg Robinson didn't have a good end to his run at Texas. He's had some trouble since then in terms of just, not trouble recruiting-wise or anything else. He's not in trouble with the NCAA, but maybe not as well looked at from just an X's and O's standpoint. And so all of a sudden those celebrity hires are not coming to fruition. And that's the question I think that Carolina fans are having is, okay, we hired Mac, but who's Mac going to hire? And early returns aren't that great as far as who he's putting in place to help him, with this rebuild.
Well, one of the things that you have to look at that could possibly come up here, and it happened, of course, with Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Bowden. Chris, you have to ask yourself, are we going to end up with a coaching waiting process here? Or are they going to end up trying to find somebody who, you mentioned that Texas Tech coach getting let go. Obviously, he's a great offensive mind. Are they going to basically have a side deal or quietly agreed upon, and if you come here as one of our coordinators, we're going to end up turning the program over to you? And that's one thing to keep in mind. And the other thing that you have to run into, where North Carolina is concerned, and the same thing we talked about earlier, where Louisville is concerned, how quickly the descent has happened. You're in a situation to where they did beat, I believe it was Western Carolina, but everybody knew that North Carolina was in trouble when East Carolina schooled them earlier this year. Yeah. And it's one thing to have it down here. It's one thing to take a slight step back, as Florida State has or Virginia Tech has. But when you're talking about going through a season and finishing it up at 2-10 or 3-9, as in Louisville and North Carolina, you've got a plenty of work to do, and nobody in this league is going to give you anything. It's going to be a struggle. We watched how quickly, again, we'll use Bronco, for example. He came in and he had something that the kids believed in, and he was able to turn it around in 3 years. The problem is you're playing 8 games in this conference, and I just don't think there's an easy game anywhere on the table. There's teams that have better years, but I expect Louisville and North Carolina both to bounce back. But the question is, how far can you bounce back? You can't no longer look at your schedule and go, okay, well, all I'm going to do now is play Boston College this week. All of a sudden, Boston College is pretty solid. Well, then there was that gimme win that we're only playing Wake Forest. Those games are gone. So you're right. Who he surrounds himself with is going to be really important here. And I would not be surprised if you end up with a coach in waiting after the process is said and done.
At least actually Carolina, so we talked about how Carolina's at least got somebody in place and they're starting their process. You talk about Louisville. Let's go Louisville next. I didn't mention them in the preamble to this podcast. But yeah, Louisville also we know has a job open. Bobby Petrino was fired a few weeks ago. And here's some interesting news. I did not foresee this happening, Jerry, and I wonder if you did. You have closer thoughts about Louisville since you have some family ties there. But I assumed all along, like everybody else did, that Jeff Brom, who's at Purdue, who's had some success there, he's turned that into a bowl program. He's been there 2 years, so he's bowl eligible both years at a program that isn't always a bowl eligible kind of school. But he's turned that around quickly. Of course, he did a great job at Western Kentucky. When he left there, he had them running up and down the field, scoring points in record numbers. And since he's left there, Western Kentucky's not been the same since in the last 2 years. So, and of course, he had that great history. He was a quarterback at Louisville. He started his coaching career at Louisville. He's had, he's from Louisville. He's a Louisville kid. I mean, literally grew up in Louisville. And so, if anybody is a favorite son, a hometown hero, that would be Jeff Brom. And he's done a great job at Purdue. So naturally, we're going to throw the Brinks truck and back it up to his house, and he's going to come here and coach. Except he's not going to. That's how much of a dumpster fire Louisville must be, I assume, Jerry, because if he won't take the job, that is not a good sign. You think I'm reading that right?
Well, the thing that you have to look at, I was a little concerned in the order that Brom did this. He came out once all the rumors started, and they were all out there, and they were basically just going to hand him the job. And he came out and said, listen, I really am happy here. I like it here in West Lafayette. I'm going to stay here in West Lafayette. And after I read all of that, I'm going, okay, I hope that doesn't come back to bite him. I mean, there's still people, Chris, to this day that are bitter about Nick Saban and the situation with the Miami Dolphins. So when I'm not going to do this. So it was after Brom made those statements that he did sit down and meet with the athletic director at Louisville. After he said, I'm not accepting the job, I'm sitting there going, man, I hope he sticks to that now. Because if not, you're just going to have created another disgruntled fan base who was going to remember that for a long time. And Brom's star is on the rise, but here's the question. And I'll even compare Brom's situation to Cutcliffe. Cutcliffe, by most people's standards, is one of the best coaches in the country. Okay? The reality is he has a ceiling at Duke University. He does. As much as I live and die with that football program, Cutcliffe has a ceiling. He's not going to win a national championship at Duke. He was fortunate enough to play in the ACC championship game one time. But now let's take a look at Brom. Brom he did his job at Western Kentucky. He got the promotion, the step up, if you will, and he's went to Purdue, and he's made Purdue bowl eligible 2 years in a row. Chris, take a look at who else is in the Big Ten. I'm not sure how high the ceiling is for Purdue and Jeff Brom if he stays at that job. That's what concerns me. I love the loyalty. He did get a healthy pay raise. I think it went from $4 million to $6 million. And you have to ask yourself, are you going to be okay to be the fifth or sixth option in your league?
It kind of makes me think, and this isn't ACC related news, but it is Virginia college football news. JMU, James Madison, which 2 years ago won the national championship in FCS. Last year was a runner-up. 28-2 the last 2 years, 37-5 including this year. Mike Houston, the coach at JMU the last 3 years, he took the job after a good quick run at the Citadel, bringing that program back to playoff level football. And LeVar Ryan also, he coached there, and he's had I think his career record is 80-24. So he's had great records at 3 different stops. Well, he got offered this week, and he acknowledged that he was offered the job at UNC Charlotte, but said he's interested but not taking the job, which is kind of odd in its own way. He's still got a playoff game this weekend, and theoretically, if they win, they got more playoff games coming up at JMU. And expectations that they would be playing more football after this weekend, certainly at JMU with the success they've had in recent years. So, but he's talking publicly about this job offer from Charlotte. And then ECU apparently, ECU did fire Scotty Montgomery, former Duke assistant coach, former Duke offensive coordinator, after 3 seasons at ECU. And the word is that ECU got rid of Montgomery when they did. ECU still has a game this weekend. They play NC State in a makeup game, a Hurricane makeup game if you want to call it that. But they were apparently going to fire Montgomery on Monday, next Monday, after their season was over. but decided to move up their firing of Montgomery because they want Houston too. Now that said, so Houston is wanted by ECU. He's wanted by Charlotte. He's at JMU. Last year there were a lot of people who wanted him after his great run at JMU at that time, 28-2 record through 2 seasons. And he says, Jerry, this goes back to what you were saying about Brom saying he loves being at Purdue. Last year, Houston says, hey, I love being at JMU. He wrangled a raise. He's making $515,000 a year at the FCS level, so that's a huge amount of money at that level. But of course, ECU paid Montgomery over $1 million a year. Charlotte presumably would pay similar amount at the FBS level. So, you sometimes you catch yourself with your own words. If you talk about how happy you are, but you're at a place. I mean, at JMU, no offense to JMU, national championship just a couple of years ago. But yes, there is more money to be made if you are a good coach at another level. And for Brom, kind of same thing. I mean, yeah, if you're at Purdue, I agree, Jerry. It's not quite like what Tony Bennett did at Virginia, coming to Virginia when Virginia was a second division team in the ACC in basketball, and he's made it maybe the marquee program in the ACC. That potential was there. I don't know that Purdue has that same potential in Big Ten football, and certainly JMU is behind the 8 ball as well.
Well, the two things there, if you talk about loyalty and jobs, I'm a big fan of Montgomery. I think Montgomery is an offensive mastermind, and I hated that he took the ECU job. The ECU program was on its way down. It needed to finish its crash and burn. And the problem is when you take that first job, when you take your first head coaching job and it doesn't go your way, you're not guaranteed a second head coaching job.
Right.
You're in a situation where I'm hoping that that's not Scotty Montgomery's only chance. I love everything that he accomplished while he was at Duke. And it's something to where, so now, where Brom's concerned, we switch back, he had to survive a game with Indiana to get a 6th win. Now, he did make some national headways by just spanking Urban Meyer one night on national TV, but you're in a situation to where I don't know what's realistic as far as Purdue's expectations. I do believe that Louisville is set up, and I would go back all the way back to Sellersburg. How many people left Louisville, thinking I'm going to go get a better job? Charlie Strong, Texas came up and threw a barnyard of money at him, and he eventually left. And of course, Petrillo left, and you're sitting there. I'm afraid now what they're going to end up doing is they're going to have to end up hiring a young coordinator. And I'm not sure that that's going to get the job done in today's ACC. Brom was a name. Brom, as you said, was the hometown hero, if there ever was one. And it's going to be interesting. The other comparison to Brom and Brom's star, let's go back to Brad Stevens.
Yeah.
Brad Stevens did something at Butler, twice. He did it 2 years. And yes, Gordon Hayward's a nice player, and he obviously is going to have a nice NBA career, but I was sitting there, and when Brad Stevens is looking at this long term, he's going, can I keep Butler at this level? Is this realistic? And I think he made the right career decision. He went while he could, while his star was on the rise. He took the job, and of course, he's now with the Boston Celtics. But in the situation where Purdue's concerned, I'm not sure that you can get Purdue to the upper echelon of that conference. And now it's just going to get worse because Scott Frost is going to turn around Nebraska.
Yeah.
Now that's just a given. So I think Louisville, with the right situation, could be right back at the top of the ACC. But now how many people might want that job, Chris, who's thinking what you just said? Wow, how bad of a dumpster fire is it if your main guy won't come back and take the job?
Yeah. If your guy, he's your guy. He bleeds. He bleeds Louisville red. And you mentioned, Jerry, when you start talking about the guys who've left there for greener pastures, at least in their own mind. Petrino left before, Charlie Strong, Howard Schnellenberger way back. I mean, it makes you think the Louisville fan base, the Louisville alum base, the people who fund Louisville sports, obviously think of themselves in one way. They think of themselves as, hey, we're Cadillac. We are the top of the line here. But the people they hire don't always. Now, Rick Pitino obviously stayed there for a long time, and he's only not there now because of issues. But those issues also were hurting Louisville. The fact that, they had the scandal around Pitino and the basketball, and now, it's not that there's scandal with Petrino, but there were some hurt feelings on the part of some alums that, Petrino kind of jilted them. Not kind of. He really did jilt them when he left the first time. Not only did he take the job with the Falcons, but before that he was begging for the Auburn job. He eventually took the Arkansas job after he left the Falcons. I mean, he was just a serial ladder climber and couldn't help the fact. And then they brought him back after the issues at Arkansas, got him fired there. So, I mean, all that stuff, and you take him back. And of course, Pitino had his own issues, personal issues, the issues with the affair and all that kind of stuff. So, and now Papa John having his own issues, John Schnatter having his issues and he was a guy who was really funding a lot of this. So all that around this, and and in that sense, when I look at the whole totality of things there, maybe I don't blame Jeff Brom right now. Now, if you're Jeff Brom, of course, you're making a calculated risk here, not only to stay at Purdue, because Purdue, as I think you laid out the case here very well, Jared. That's a tough job to think that you're going to be there for 20 years and win championships in the Big Ten at Purdue with all the other resources at Penn State and Michigan, Ohio State, Nebraska. Those schools have such great resources. It's hard to imagine Purdue being able to compete with that on a regular basis. But not only that, but your dream job probably only comes up once. This had to be his dream job. If you're Jeff Brom, you quarterbacked at Louisville, you coached there a second time, you're a Louisville native. This is your chance. It's not going to come back again because they're going to hire somebody. Louisville has the resources. They'll win football games again. And so, yeah, but I think that had to enter into his thinking. It had to enter into there. This is the only time I'm ever going to be able to say no to this job, and I'm saying no to this job. That speaks even louder volumes to me that he had to make that decision when he did.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they go from here. And now they're not the only show in town looking for a coach. It was funny I've always considered myself a Paul Johnson fan. I loved what he did at Georgia Southern. I was a huge fan of what he was able to accomplish down there in Statesville. We were living down there at the time, and what he got done at Navy. And I just was afraid that Paul Johnson had worn out his welcome at Georgia Tech. And it's a unique offense. And if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. If you don't, it's very similar, Chris, to Virginia basketball, in the fact that if you're a fan of it, it's awesome. If not, you're not sure. And I'm glad that Paul Johnson was able to go out on his own terms. I don't think that Paul Johnson's done. The way his words came out, the way the statement read, I think Paul Johnson's just going to take a break, and you'll see him coaching again. But now you're Louisville. You're one of a multitude of teams looking for a coach. You didn't hide from anybody who your number one choice was. And, the other name that you could still possibly throw out there is Charlie Strong, who I know Charlie Strong got a boatload of money from Texas. He went, after he got let go there, he went to South Florida. I think this year he started out on fire. I want to say that the program was 6-0 or 7-0, but I don't think they've won a football game in a month. So I'm not sure where their mindset would be on possibly bringing somebody else back. But I just don't think they're going to get a big name coach right now. Yeah,
you're when you fire somebody like you do Petrino early, because they got rid of him earlier in November. So you do that to position yourself to be able to put your feelers out. You know, your search crew, whoever you hire, they always hire search firms now. It seems like the athletics programs. You hire your search firm, and they reach out to agents, and they try to gauge interest in whoever might be available. And that's how Virginia, lucked into. And I say this, lucked into Bronco Mendenhall. Who knew he was even available? He was at BYU, and he was a lifer. And UVA somehow ends up with Bronco Mendenhall. But you do that for that reason. Virginia Tech announced that Frank Beamer was retiring early in November. That was 3 years ago. Same process. You're able to you want to hire somebody quickly because the best people go quickly. The Monday after the regular season ends is usually the Black Monday for coaching, for college coaching, because that's when the pink slips are put out there and you're starting to hire new guys. And so yeah, you're behind the eight ball if you're Louisville and Georgia Tech. That threw me. Paul Johnson threw me for a loop. I did not see that coming. I mean, he was certainly on the hot seat. I thought their team played great down the stretch this season. They lost to Georgia. That was going to happen. But played really good in the ACC down the stretch. Finished second in the Coastal. Beat Virginia down the stretch, among other things. So, and he's only 61 years old, and that's the other thing. I agree, Jerry. I think he's got to be taking a break, maybe just a year break, and he'll be back, whether or not it's at Power 5 level or not because of his age. But then again, Mac Brown just got a job at 68 years old. But what will be interesting for Georgia Tech now is that I would assume that this didn't come out of nowhere for them. I would hope for Georgia Tech athletics program's sake that Paul would have let them know earlier on, hey, I'm thinking about this. I think I'm going to step down at the end of the season. Because if it did catch them by surprise, then they're also behind the eight ball. But we're hearing Ken Wisenhunt, he's an offensive coordinator now. I think is he with the Steelers now? I'm not sure. But he former NFL coach, took a team to a Super Bowl. I'm not sure about his experience at the college level. But whoever takes that job is going to have a bit of a rebuilding job just in this sense. I mean, not that Georgia Tech doesn't have talent. They won 7 games this year and have a bowl game still coming up. But the offense is built completely around one very specific kind of attack that most coaches don't coach within. So unless they hire a coach who also coaches that triple option, you've got to go out and recruit new quarterbacks. You've got to find linemen who can block differently. And Georgia Tech's, that triple option, you like lighter linemen who are more mobile to be able to go out, and do those cut blocks and, get out on the edge more. The more traditional pro style offenses, the fast break offenses you see that throw the ball a lot, you need bigger linemen to be able to eat up space and pass block against bigger defensive linemen now that you see. So it's a different ballgame. And that's going to be a year or two of transition for whoever takes that job. So this is going to be a very important hire for Georgia Tech, and it won't be very easy. They'll have to have some patience. I don't expect Georgia Tech will do great next year just because of that transition.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Unless somebody wants to come in and adopt the offense, you're going to have an uphill challenge, and I would say it's probably going to be at least a year or two. And what's dangerous about that is again, the up and down elevator that is ACC football right now. We're sitting here, and I can't go back at any point, Chris, in the history of any conference and find what happened in the ACC this year. Okay, in any conference in football, you've got a 6-way tie for 4th place. Let's picture this now. You have a 6-way tie for 4th place in this league. And you have just 6 different 7-5 teams. And let's just we'll assume Virginia Tech will take care of business. And then you have 2 6-6 teams, and Syracuse and NC State edge to the top a little bit. But you're in a situation to where this could go in any direction. This could and it's going to happen quickly in the fact that Louisville and North Carolina are going to try to come back. You're in a situation now because we're 7-5 and going to a bowl game is when you're picking the bowls out and you're looking at this from a conference standpoint. Okay, the 4th best team in our league is 7-5.
Yeah.
So that That's how competitive this is getting, and it's just going to continue to get more competitive now. That the scariest team out there, in my mind, right now, Wake Forest. Who knew when they put this young man in to be their quarterback 3 weeks ago? All he did was go on the road in his very first start, and he was a 19-point underdog at NC State. Yeah. So now all of a sudden you can't even. I mean, so for Georgia Tech to be sitting there and hey, they had a successful year. Hey, they're 7-5, but now you're in a situation to where I don't know that you can afford to take a rebuild in this conference if you're not prepared to have a couple 3-9 seasons.
Hey, I think I'm solving their problem. Not Ken Wisenhunt. Ken Numatalolo, the Navy coach, runs the triple option. He's very familiar with it. There'd be seamless transition, but that's not going to happen. It doesn't seem. But other than that, yeah, it's tough because you're now the defense would certainly, the defensive side of the ball is going to be fine. And actually, Georgia Tech had a pretty solid defense this year. They in recent years they had not played good defense. They were 4th or 5th in the ACC total defense, scoring defense this year. So good defensive side of the ball. But yeah, offense is going to be a complete makeover. It's going to be tough for Georgia Tech there. Hey, let's talk about. There is still one important ACC game, not just Virginia Tech Marshall playing a makeup game and NC State playing ECU in a makeup game just to finish out their 12-game seasons, but Clemson and Pitt this weekend. Now, Clemson obviously is Clemson. A lot of folks are saying they're the only team that has a chance of beating Alabama, but before they can possibly even play Alabama or even play their way into playing Alabama, because right now Clemson's number 2, Alabama's number 1. Theoretically, if chalk holds, they play in a championship game in early January. But before we can even get close to that, Clemson still has to beat Pitt, a team that beat them a couple years ago down in Clemson. And I know that nobody else thinks this, but there's a chance. I've seen this Pitt team play in person. You saw them play Duke and score 52 points on what to that point had been a pretty good Duke defense. This Pitt team is built to at least give Clemson some worries. The way they can run the ball, Pitt can make this interesting.
Well, this is what's really interesting, and I want to give Reese Davis credit for making this point this week. They were talking about the upcoming championship games, and you're in a situation where, as much as you and I want to talk about this being football, this is a money-making machine. The NCAA football is as big as it gets as far as money goes. And when these games were put together, they were put together to make money, to generate money. And the reality now is that what Reese said was they've outlived their usefulness. And what we're looking at here is what this is going to cost. And the great example is Clemson Pitt. Now, anybody who looks at this game casually is thinking Clemson's going to win this game by 30 points. Okay? So, if by some chance Pitt has the offense that they had against Virginia in a bad weather game, the fact that the offense that played against Duke in a bad weather game, or is it the team that went to Miami last week that's going to show up? So, if by somehow Pitt were to find a way to upset Clemson, okay, all that's going to do is cost the ACC millions and millions of dollars. Yeah. And so now, as in the SEC, you've got the exact same thing. If the playoffs just started now, okay, Georgia and Alabama are playing in a national semifinal. It's a national semifinal, but instead, it's an elimination game. Yeah. So you're sitting here in the SEC, and when these games were created, it was created to think, oh man, we're going to get an extra week. Oh man, we're going to have all this money. It's going to be worth all this money. Well, then not too long after the championship games were put in place, they changed the playoff format again. Yeah. And you said yourself, again, I don't take it personally because I am a bowl game junkie, self-admitted. But the reality is the average fan doesn't care about the bowl games other than the 2 playoff games. So you're in a situation to where college football is, by continuing to chase the almighty dollar, I'm not sure that they're not hurting themselves. You're in a situation where I'm watching tonight. My first one will be tonight. Washington is playing Utah.
Yeah.
Big game for the Huskies, and if they win, they get to go to the Rose Bowl. Now that was for years and years and years, that was the Pac-8 and then the Pac-10 and the Pac-12. That was your dream, to go to the Rose Bowl. Well, now you go to the Rose Bowl, and like if you had an ambitious thought, you were going to get into the semifinals. It really has changed what the game is worth. Now, I think it'll be entertaining. I think that if the right Pitt team shows up, but I've watched a lot of football in my life, much more college than NFL. I've never watched a defense in a college game that looked like an NFL team. And that's what Clemson looks like to me this year. They just look like, now they're all going to go to the NFL, but it's unbelievable how talented that is. So all of those tackles that the Pitt backs slipped in the Virginia game and in the Duke game and in the Wake Forest game, I'm just not sure that the Clemson front seven are going to let those runners break loose.
To your point, I'll jump back to your point for a second about the playoff and how it's changed things, and how this game is impacting that, Pitt versus Clemson. So if you had a system, and I've advocated for this system since before we had the development of the current system of 4-team playoff, the ideal playoff is a 16-team playoff. And I say it for this reason. There are 10 1A conferences, 10 FBS conferences, football bowl subdivision conferences. If you have the champion of each of those 10, including your Sun Belts, including your Conference USAs, American Athletic Conferences, if you have the champion of each of those conferences qualifying for a playoff, that means all of a sudden the championships mean something. So Pitt plays Clemson, and if Pitt beats Clemson, what does Pitt get out of that? They get a slightly better bowl, and they also lose money because Clemson doesn't get to play in the playoff, and the whole ACC loses money, which means Pitt loses money. So you win the game, but you lose the war. So if you have a system where you have all 10 of your conference champions as automatic qualifiers to a playoff, Pitt goes into this game this weekend and says, hey, we beat Clemson and we're in the playoff. Even with 5 losses, we're in the playoff. And then if you have 16, you have 10 automatic qualifiers. You have 6 at large. So Clemson could still be, and it certainly would be in this, you would assume, just like the loser of the SEC game would be a at-large team. And so you have 16 games, or 16 teams. You have 15 games, so it takes 4 weeks. People would say you can't do that. Well, somehow 1AA, FCS as we call it, has a 24-team playoff. So it works. It can work if you do it the right way. But until that point, those games are meaningless because they're just extra games that make money that also cost you money. As you said there, Jerry, I think it's very well put. If you look at Northwestern Ohio State. Ohio State has an outside shot right now of getting into the playoff. Things have to happen. For example, Georgia not beating Alabama. I think if Georgia beats Alabama, both those teams are in. I don't think Alabama drops to 5th if they lose, unless they lose bad somehow to Georgia. I think if Georgia beats Alabama, they're both in the playoff. But if you're Ohio State, you have to hope for Alabama to win. You also have to hope for Oklahoma to lose to West Virginia. It's possible Ohio State jumps Oklahoma with a win and with an Oklahoma win over Texas, but you don't feel as good that night if that's not the case. So yeah, I mean, Ohio State's playing Northwestern. If Northwestern beats Ohio State, that can ruin things for the Big Ten. If Texas beats Oklahoma, that ruins things for the Big 12. So the only conference championship game this weekend where if Alabama beats Georgia, then Georgia's not in. The SEC doesn't have 2 teams getting playoff shares. So that's the only thing that's at stake this weekend, really, is whether or not the SEC gets 1 or 2 playoff shares. Then the ACC can be knocked out. The Big 12 can knock itself out. The Big 10 can knock itself out. And under the system that I advocate for, and I'm not the only one certainly advocating for this, but if you have a 16-team playoff, and plus you give the CUSA, you give the Sun Belt, you give those schools a play-in game, at least a chance. They're going to get their heads kicked in most likely, but at least it's kind of like the NCAA basketball tournament. Hey, UMBC beat UVA last year. There is hope for schools from those conferences to maybe have an upset possibility. But the current system, yeah, it's still broken. It's not where we need to be.
Well, it's one of those things where every time an adjustment is made, I'm not sure that first of all, the bowls are huge for the cities. And the charities that they fund and what it does for the economy. In fact, they're adding one next year. I believe Myrtle Beach is going to have a bowl game. So it'll be the first time in a couple of years that they've added one. So I'm in a situation where these bowls can be part of the playoff. There's the people who are going to say, well, we don't want to eliminate the bowl games. Well, they haven't eliminated the bowl games with a 4-team playoff. They just, they're rotating through. So to get to 16, you've got to go to 8. And it was the same thing when the NCAA basketball kept expanding. Hey, well, this is too many. This is too many. If it was mine for a day, because every conference plays a conference tournament, I'm going to say all 305 teams get in, and it's all elimination games. So you have 2 more games, but that's what you're doing anyway. In other words, the 9th place ACC team is playing the 8th place ACC team. It's a postseason game, so that way everybody gets a chance. I had not heard what you just pitched out there about with it being 16 and letting each major conference have. How do you not feel for Central Florida? Last year everybody said, oh, well, we're going to quit listening to these guys because Auburn's going to hand them their lunch. So then you do that. I thought they spanked Auburn. So then now they run the table again. So there's a little part of me going, I don't want it to be at Clemson's expense, but there's a little part of me going, what all would have to happen for Central Florida to get to play in the game? Just because you're sitting there, I don't care if you're playing junior high school kids. If you go 25-0, if I'm there, it's a hoax. If you're saying I can go 25-0 and I still, it doesn't give me anything. And as you said, where Pitt's concerned, if Pitt were to win this game, they're going to hurt themselves on 3 fronts. So you're right. Georgia, a great game. I think the Washington-Utah game, 2 top 20 teams. And again, the winner goes to the Rose Bowl, and it's going to be worth something. There will be no loser in that game. But if Pitt, Northwestern, or Texas were to win this weekend, it's going to actually cost the conference the money that they're making by having this tournament game.
Yeah, it just seems to me that the playoff works at every other level of college football. 1AA, Division II, Division III, they all have playoffs. They've been working for years. We can figure it out and make a lot more money at the top level if we do it this way. But it's honestly, I think what it is that the current bowl system has its own advocates, and there's money thrown around a little bit behind the scenes that keeps this from working the way it should. But to me, a 16 team playoff, that's 15 games. Every one of those games means something towards a championship. Those are all meaningful games. Whether it's like I'm looking at the standings right now. Sun Belt right now is Appalachian State versus Louisiana for this weekend, right? So the winner of that game plays Alabama, right? Okay, they're going to play Alabama. They're going to lose to Alabama. But you know what? For a week leading up to that game, the Appalachian State people are reminding themselves they beat Michigan 10 years ago or whatever it was, and they're thinking we can pull, lightning can strike. We can catch it right here. And you'll watch. You as a fan, a casual fan, you're not a fan of Alabama or Appalachian State, you'll still watch that game just enough to know what happens. And you'll watch all the other first-round games. Those games will have record ratings. The first-round games will have record. The second-round games, the semifinals, the finals all have record ratings because it'll be a playoff. It works in the NFL. We don't just invite the top 4 teams at the end of the regular season in the NFL. We have 12 teams play, and it makes a lot of money. So all I'm advocating for is making more money, and also deciding who's the champion a better way. But it'll happen eventually. Jerry, I'm 46, and you're a couple years older than me. I'm not sure if it's going to happen in our lifetime necessarily, but it's going to happen eventually.
Well, the thing you take a look at for forever, it was, remember the split polls.
Yeah.
You know, we had a couple of years where different teams won the national championship. It took them forever to come up with the BCS championship game.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the end all. And then years go by and years go by and years go by, and okay, we'll go from 2 games to 4 games. You know, I'm sorry, from 2 teams to 4 teams.
Yeah.
It took a lot. It took a lot to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, the people who love the bowls the same way that I do are all saying, you can't do this. You can't let the bowls be the games. That's what you're doing now. Let the Armed Forces Bowl in Fort Worth, let it be Alabama playing, you know, fill in the blank, or if it's Appalachian State.
Well,
away with the bowl game.
I actually think, though, in one case, I don't know if you do away with the bowl games for a different reason, though. I would say the NIT still exists in basketball. There's still an NIT tournament. There's still that collegebasketball.net tournament. You know, there's other postseason tournaments outside of the NCAA tournament where teams who had good seasons but not quite good enough to get in the big tournament, they still get to play some games and make some money. I don't know that I would advocate for having the bowl games play the playoffs, and it's for this reason. Except for the championship game, like the Super Bowl. I'll use the NFL model. The Super Bowl is played neutral field, largely a neutral field. Sometimes it could happen to be on a home field, but I don't think it's happened to be on a home field for a long time, maybe ever. But theoretically, it could be played in a home team stadium. But the other games are played at the team that sort of earned it in the regular season. So there's that part of it, the earning it part of it. But also, all right, so if you're a Alabama fan, and you want to follow your team through the first round, second round, third round, and then, of course, there's a championship round. There's 4 rounds to get to the championship game to win a championship. So if you play the bowls as the games instead of playing them on home campuses, you're telling that Alabama fan for maybe 4 weeks you've got to travel somewhere. That's not going to work, because not a lot of fans are going to be able to travel to the first game and the second game and the third game and then the championship game. So I would say, and actually from a money-making standpoint, if I can sell 92,000 tickets to Alabama for 3 weeks, that's making money. We could share that money. Keep the other bowls for the other teams who don't make that 16-team playoff. Maybe you don't have 40 of them anymore. Maybe you have 25 of them, 30 of them, whatever the number might be, to reward those teams who go 7-5 or 8-4 and didn't quite get in the playoff. But I think that the playoff would have to be a home field kind of thing, just because from an economic standpoint, you can't ask those fans to take 4 trips to get to the championship game. But there's still a way to make money on campuses, I guess, is a way to sum it up.
On that same note, though, because we're talking from apples to oranges now. Let's just say that Tony gets it done this year. Okay, that Tony gets it done this year. What are you going to have to do? So take off your sports writer cap for a second and just be a UVA grad fan. And you want to go with your team to the national championship. What are you going to have to do that?
Yeah, make all the.
You're going to have to go on neutral sites, and you can make them regional neutral sites. But you're saying the Alabama football fan can't go to 4 games. Okay, well, the Virginia basketball fan, maybe it's 2 games in Charlotte, and then it's 2 games in Syracuse, and then it's not that different when you break it down that way.
Well, it is in one system. It is in one case. Basketball arenas hold about 20,000, 15 to 20,000. Football stadiums can hold 90,000, and the NCAA tournament in basketball exists as a TV event. Having attended a number of the NCAA tournament games in the last few years now, there are fans who travel who will come from Charlottesville to go to Greensboro, or Charlottesville to go to New York, like when UVA was in the Sweet 16. There are fans who travel. There's also the big schools, the UVAs, the Dukes, Carolinas have national fans. They have fans everywhere, I guess you could say, alums everywhere. and a lot of the local fans in New York will go to root for Duke because they're there already. You don't need as many of them to fill those stadiums up, and so if you're asking a few, and if you're asking 3,000 or 4,000 people to make a trip to go to New York for the Sweet 16 and go to San Antonio for the Final Four, that's asking 3,000 or 4,000. And the stadium still gets filled because there's a lot of local fans in San Antonio and New York, wherever it may be, who buy tickets. But if you want a half-empty football stadium, you're kind of going in that same realm. And I think that's what would happen. You see a lot of bowl games in this day and age. When the TV cameras pan around, there's a lot of empty seats. And I don't think that's good for visuals. It's also not good for the bottom line.
The other, on that same note, I absolutely see your point there. On that same note, when it comes time, again, let's just you and I are both going to go to a bowl game. Okay, we're both. I'm assuming that you're going to go to a bowl game and watch. As when the average fan is listening, okay, and they like listening to people like Reese Davis and Herb Street and these guys. When people are constantly telling you all these bowl games are meaningless, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. They don't. It's tough for the average person who maybe they didn't go to UVA. Maybe they didn't go to UVA, but they grew up in Charlottesville and they love the program. And you're sitting there and ask yourself this, okay? The bowl game has to be a trip you want to take. And that's the point where every time they keep throwing in more bowl games, I'm sitting there, and at least with Myrtle Beach, you're going to get to do what? If you go to Myrtle Beach, you're going to at least get to have a vacation out of the deal. And so when you're sitting there, and again, I'm on the other end. I'm going to go watch Duke play their bowl game regardless of where it is, just because it's something I do. But as a UVA fan, again, remove your obligation, if you will, as Augusta Free Press, and just say, hey, you're going to have a conversation. Hey, Crystal, I'm going to go to the game. Let's go to the game. You have to be a little concerned about where it is that you might be going. And that's the thing about traveling to something where a bowl game is concerned. Right now, we're all going to find out on Sunday. Okay? Yeah. And there are 15 national publications that do the bowl projections. Uh-huh. And because of how upside down this is, okay, where especially what the ACC has done to it by having so many teams, I don't even know what a 16 tiebreaker looks like. So you're sitting here. No, let's forget the press pass. So now on Sunday, they're going to announce 2 weeks out, hey, this is where everybody's going. And as a fan, Chris Graham's a fan, a UVA grad, are you going to El Paso, Texas?
Chris Graham, UVA fan, is probably not going to Charlotte, to be honest with you, for an exhibition football game, because that's what they are. I mean, that's what Chris Graham, football fan, thinks of bowl games at this stage, and I'm not being cynical. I'll watch it on TV. I'll when they announce on Sunday, I would say, you know what? It's December 28th. That's this day of the week. This is the time it is. I'm not doing anything that day. For those 3.5 hours, I'm watching UVA play football against whoever they're playing. But no, I'm not going to Charlotte. I'm not going, much less El Paso. If the game was in Charlottesville, I'd go. If it was in Blacksburg, I wouldn't go. I mean, that's the thing about football today. Oh, go ahead.
You just answered why when you stand the crowd at these bowl games, you're seeing empty seats.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're seeing empty seats, and when you're sitting there, it's the same thing. The bowl game doesn't mean what it used to, and now it's no longer about who deserves to go to which bowl game.
Right.
It's no different when the NIT, when they give the bid to whoever guarantees most tickets sold.
Yeah.
So it's a situation to where that's why I learned. First thing you learn about going to a bowl game, don't ever buy your ticket in advance. Because you're going to go someplace and, El Paso, Texas, first of all, is one of the most amazing football stadiums you're ever going to see. It's literally built into the side of a cage. Okay? But it's El Paso, Texas.
Yeah.
And it's not like, the Final Four right now. You're going to help me out. Where are they playing it this year?
I think it's Minneapolis this year.
Okay. See, it's Minneapolis. Thank you. So you're in a situation to where you know in advance, months in advance,
Yeah.
Chris, that if UVA makes it to the Final Four, you know where you're going. So picture now, you're not going to find out until Sunday.
Yeah.
And it can be one of 9 cities. It's not conducive. And again, I wouldn't call them an exhibition game, but I can see why somebody would. But it's getting harder and harder to get people to those games if they don't regionally match up somehow.
Well, you're talking about the Sun Bowl, and the fact that the ACC has these tie-ins with the Sun Bowl and like the one in Detroit. Those are so far out of the footprint that it's almost a guarantee that nobody's going to go, or very few people are going to go from the schools unless they happen to live in that area. Because now Jerry Carter will go because you've got that bowl streak going with Duke, and you started it back when Duke didn't go to a lot of bowls. Now they're going to a bowl every year, so they're really stretching you thin as far as that goes. And I love that you're doing that. But El Paso, you've been to El Paso, you've been to Detroit. For most fans, they'll say, you know what, Charlotte's not too far away. I'll go to Charlotte. Scott German was making this point earlier, and we had a debate on this. The Belk Bowl is the game in Charlotte now, and he was trying to make the point, kind of using that old line of thinking about how the bowls really want to make sure that the hotels get filled up. So one logical Belk Bowl could be NC State versus South Carolina. But those two fan bases live so close to Charlotte that they wouldn't fill it up. They wouldn't go to get a hotel. They would just drive the game and drive back. Well, that's one way of thinking of it. The other way of thinking of it is if I'm the people at the Belk Bowl, I don't necessarily make any money if the hotels are filled up, but I do make money if tickets are sold. And if NC State's playing South Carolina, those are two sets of fans who could drive an hour or two to this game. They'll buy tickets to this game. We might actually sell that game out. Whereas if we put Virginia or Boston College, certainly Boston College in that game, or all the way down to Miami in that game, maybe we don't get a lot of tickets sold by that school, and maybe the other school on the other side doesn't sell a lot of tickets. Maybe we'll get more people watching on TV, but we don't make money off TV. We've already gotten our check from ESPN. We need to put butts in seats. And so maybe NC State, South Carolina is a better way to go. And, hey, that's going to be – if I'm running that bowl, that's my game because I'm selling tickets.
Well, it's funny is the two of the sites have Duke playing South Carolina in Charlotte.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
And you're sitting there in the process, and I've seen 3 of them that have UVA. Now, first of all, UVA didn't go to one for a few years, and then they went to, I would argue, the worst bowl atmosphere you could possibly have. We don't have to rehash just how cold it was. You and I were both there.
Yeah.
But first of all, that was a local trip.
Yeah.
But the one thing about playing, we played in New York City.
Yeah.
You're playing in an outdoor stadium in the Northeast in December.
Yeah.
You're sitting there and you're running the risk. Last year, the outside temperature in Detroit, okay, not the wind chill, the temperature was -1. Now, the difference is, in Detroit, you're playing in a beautiful stadium that the Lions call home. Yeah. It was 72 and sunny indoors. So you're sitting here, again, as a fan, you're going, first of all, I would tell you that if I didn't have the streak going of having been to every one they played in my lifetime, I probably would pass this year.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that you're going to find out on Sunday, and now we have, let's assume Virginia Tech wins, and we remember Oregon's one of ours, so there's 12 teams. Well, we only have 10 slots. But that means the two teams are going to get pushed out. And then now, the pushed out bowls are in Dallas, Tampa and Birmingham. And two of them were the week before Christmas. So two of our teams are gonna be playing on a bowl game that basically this isn't going to be very watched. So everything about the bowl games is stacked against them. And so you take the Final Four, if you will, and that de-emphasizes the rest of the bowls. Then you're in a situation to where you have to regionally. I kind of feel sorry for Boston College and Syracuse because they're always going to be looking to put them in New York if it's at all possible, so that you can. I don't think the average person from Miami is going to go to New York for a bowl game.
Well, and a bit of reality there too. Miami, I mean, and this is not just the case at Virginia or Miami, but Miami doesn't fill its own stadium up unless they're playing Florida State. For football, they don't. People don't go to the games there even when they're playing at home, much less asking anybody to travel. It's tough. I mean, UVA this year, I don't know that there was a single game with an attendance over 40,000 in a 62,500 seat stadium. I was at the Virginia Tech game last week. There were 60,000 people there. That stadium holds 65 for the rivalry game, for the chance to keep the streak alive. So there were officially there were 5,000 empties. My eyes told me there were a lot more than 5,000 empties. I'm sitting in the press box looking across at the huge stands that jut up from the floor there. There were 10,000 empties that I saw. So, and this isn't so. If you're not Alabama, if you're not Notre Dame, you're not. A lot of schools aren't selling their own home games out now, and so that's what makes it tough for these bowl games because you're asking people to travel, and unless you're going to Florida, people Charlotte is south of us. But Charlotte could still be cold, obviously. I mean, you've been to some games in Charlotte this time of year, Jerry. I'm sure most of them have been cold games, not warm games. It's warmer, but it's not warm. I went to Jacksonville for the Gator Bowl for UVA. That was 2008. And for Florida, that was a cold day. It was like 55 degrees. I'm thinking I'll go to Florida in January. Man, it's going to be like 80 degrees. No, it was chilly that day. So unless you get that kind of weather, what are you going for? I mean, Crystal and I are talking about if UVA gets the Pinstripe Bowl, we love New York. We'll go to New York. And she says, well, what happens? You'll be in the press box. Where will I sit? And I said, you'll probably sit in a theater somewhere because I would not ask you to sit outside and watch that football game in that weather in New York in December. So, you made that point earlier, and I just reinforcing that. We've already had that discussion. If we go to New York, I'm watching a game for 3 hours, and she's hopefully somewhere warm during that period of time.
But it was really funny, the bad luck. I mean, Lynn and I have the conversation each year. It started out the night we broke the 19-year bowling streak and played in Charlotte. Because it was so cold that night, we bought every blanket and hoodie for sale in the stadium. I mean, it was unbelievable how cold it was. Well, the next year we played in the Peach Bowl or the Chick-fil-A Bowl in Atlanta. What's Atlanta? It's going to be, no, it's freezing in Atlanta. The game's indoors. Yeah. Okay? The third year, we're going to El Paso, Texas. Yeah. I think El Paso, Texas is the hottest place in the world. Okay? So what does it do while we're playing Arizona State? It starts snowing. Fast forward, we then go to New York, and again, you're in New York in an outdoor stadium in the wintertime. Okay, so that's why, so then you throw in Detroit, which was just a blast, and then I did the two for last year, Detroit and Indianapolis. So you're sitting here, Shreveport is just above Annapolis and Detroit, okay, and 5 of the 15 projections have us going to Shreveport. Well, I would take Shreveport in 1 because I got my best shot at it being warm in Shreveport. But you're again, it's different than going to a basketball game. Yeah. When you get to go in an arena and the element, they don't have games in the Northeast. Okay, you have 3. You have 3 bowl games, and you have Annapolis, New York, and Detroit. Again, Detroit's different. was semi-dew and sunny inside that building. But if you go to Annapolis, you're running the risk of freezing to death. If you go to New York, you're dealing with, again, the day we played IU there, it wasn't freezing, but it wasn't enjoyable. There was 2 or 3 layers of clothes on.
Yeah.
So it's tough for the bowl games. The ticket prices, I think. The first thing we'll do for this year, and it's always a good game, we'll go to the Las Vegas Bowl on our way down. Okay? We'll go to the Las Vegas Bowl. Last year it was Boise State, Oregon. Possibly Arizona State, Stanford. This year it's a good game. But even if you buy a base value ticket for the Las Vegas Bowl, which is the very first bowl game played, you're going to pay over $100 for a good seat to it.
Yeah.
And I think, again, for the average fan, just like last year when I went to the Las Vegas Bowl, went down out front, found somebody selling tickets and got in for $25.
Yeah.
Here, now, the stadium was full. It was because it's a regional matchup. It's the Mountain West versus the Pac-12. And the stadium was full. But even when the stadium's full, there's always going to be a way to get a ticket. But that's something else you have to do. The average fan. Yeah, the average fan has got to want to go someplace. There's 3 places, for instance, got you going to Nashville. Yeah. Okay, you got to have UVA going to Nashville.
Yeah.
Well, if you're into country music and you want to see the sights and see the building, it's a fun place to go. I was with UVA the last time they went to Nashville.
Yeah.
When it was the Minnesota game. Yeah. Again, it was freezing that day. It's kind of funny from a standpoint of it's fun to talk about, but the odds of getting to go, you either want to be indoors or you want to be in Florida. So other than that, there's no guarantee.
Yeah, it felt like going to a bowl game in that situation last week when Crystal and I went to the game in Blacksburg. I wanted to get 2 press credentials. Crystal, of course, is a journalist, and she's covered ACC tournaments with me in past years. But we only got 1 credential. And then I'll point out that there were 10 empty seats at least in the press box. So they could have easily credentialed a second person. But they didn't. So Crystal had to get a ticket. And we also bought a couple extra tickets. Rod Mullins, who's a contributor on our website here, covers NASCAR for us. He and his wife came along. And so we bought tickets. Well, yes, we made a mistake. We bought tickets from a friend. And a friend's a good friend for Crystal. He was selling his tickets because he wasn't going to go to the game. We bought his tickets at face value, $60 each. Well, as we're waiting for Rod and his wife to make their way to the game, meeting up in front of the stadium, we're hearing the scalpers on the street selling their tickets for $6 each. So yeah, just Jerry's advice is good advice. Either just go get them from a scalper outside the stadium, or go to StubHub. And find them. You'll find them for a lot less than face value. That is by far the way to go. And I would give the same advice actually if you get to go to an ACC tournament or an NCAA tournament. Hang outside. Hang outside the arena. The fans of the teams who just lost, they're looking to get rid of their tickets and get out of town. You'll get tickets for much less than face value. So that said, Jerry said if you want to go, there's ways to get tickets, guaranteed.
The only exception to that rule is the Maui basketball tournament.
Well, yes, because you got to talk about. So let's transition here real quick, and we'll kind of wrap up our podcast with this. We talked last Wednesday before the championship game, Duke Gonzaga. We gave a lot of insight on how the Maui Classic works, Maui Invitational works, and you warned us, Jerry, that Gonzaga was better than some folks were saying. I know they were ranked number 3. Now they're ranked number 1, but there weren't a lot of folks out there giving giving Gonzaga a chance to beat that Duke team. And Gonzaga looked good in that game. Duke rallied at the end to make it close and actually had a shot to tie it or win it at the end. But Gonzaga was impressive. So take us into that, Jerry, what you saw there on the floor and also what the environment was like.
Well, the first thing that sticks out, and I did not realize this. I knew something was wrong with Zion at the end of the game. I didn't know the severity of the problem until I was listening a couple of days later. I think it was Jay Phillips that was talking about it. He was dehydrated to the point where they had to help him out of there, help him onto the bus, and they hooked him up to an IV, and I think it was 3. got him back to where he was okay. And that's not something that was talked about up until it was time to play Indiana the other day. But the thing with Gonzaga, and what I was saying before about Gonzaga is never going to look young. Martiu has a great system in place, and he's always going to have experienced players, and they're ready for bear this year. Now, they won't have the same pressure of are they ever going to lose unless they get to a point where they're 25-0 or 26-0 because they don't play in as tough of a conference. They played a pretty good conference. The St. Mary's is actually on their level most years, but that was not a fluke. They did play incredibly well in the first half. Their shooting percentage was through the roof. It wasn't that Duke wasn't playing defense. Gonzaga was just hitting almost everything that they threw up. And again, the young man they're what many consider their best player, and at least their best shooter, is still going to be out for a little bit longer. They're only going to get better. And I had the pleasure of on the way home getting on a flight, because our flight's back to Seattle, and everybody going to Spokane is connecting through Seattle. So it was a situation where I got to actually, when I got to fly back, with an absolute plane full of very happy Gonzaga fans. And because none of them were shocked, none of them were hooping and hollering, none of them were. It wasn't a situation where anybody that went over there to follow Gonzaga was expecting to win that tournament. It's a situation to where they know what they have, they know how long they've been that good, and they caught a couple of people by surprise 2 years ago when they made it to the national championship game. It's a situation to where I was incredibly proud by what Duke was able to do, and you mentioned in the second half. You're at a point in the second half, I was it 16 or 18 points, where for the first time they took a punch. And they actually came back with five separate opportunities in the last minute to tie or win the game. And what did Gonzaga do on each one of those possessions? They blocked the shot. You're talking about, Gonzaga hit the lull that allowed Duke to make their run. But in that last minute, they just continuously were getting in defensive position and blocking the shot. And it was funny was Coach King actually found himself, Chris, having to defend Barrett because he kept trying to get the basket. He was sitting there. Obviously, we know now Zion wasn't himself at the end of the game. So Barrett was doing what a player should be doing, which is trying to lead your team. And, you sat there, and the only thing I would have done different is I wish he would have just went ahead and took the three. He had one good look there that would have won the game outright. But the amount of defense that Gonzaga played at the end was just unbelievable because you can count 5 different blocked or deflected shots in the last 60 seconds on the clock. But now the one more thing about the format that's kind of interesting because they need to match it up with the national TV. Because in that 4-game format, that championship game was game 2. There was actually 2 more games that got played after the championship game. But I think it lived up to its hype. I was not surprised that Gonzaga was able to come away from that with a W. And it's a situation to where I see them collecting an awful lot more W's. And that team is just going to continue to get better as long as he can mix transfers with graduate transfers with foreign-born players. You're in a situation to where they're not ever going to look young, and for probably half of the game, Duke looked young. But then once they were done looking young, they started playing good basketball, and it was a fun one to watch, and it might have been as good of a college basketball regular season game as I've ever attended.
I'll say this now, and I'll say it until the season's over. Barrett shoots too much. He needs to involve his teammates more. But I'll just keep saying that. Hey, mark this day on your calendar. December 15th. It's a Saturday. It's the only other game. Well, no, I shouldn't say that because there's a Sunday before that. There's 2 games on Gonzaga's schedule coming up. If they get through both these, then Jerry, you talked about there's no pressure on them to go undefeated until if they get through these 2, there will be a lot of pressure on this Gonzaga team. They got Tennessee on December 9th. That's a neutral court game, so that's you throw that one up in the air, neutral court game. But Gonzaga, Tennessee, and then December 15th, Gonzaga travels to North Carolina. So they get through that gauntlet, and if they've beaten Duke, Tennessee, and North Carolina, we might start seeing the ESPN folks start hyping them the way they've been hyping the Duke kids this year. Because if Gonzaga, I'm not sure they'll make it through that. They've already beaten Duke. Tennessee's a top 5 team. Carolina on the road. Carolina's lost a couple already this year, but Carolina in Chapel Hill. If Gonzaga gets through that little run there by December, after let's say about 8 o'clock on December 15th, if Gonzaga's still undefeated, they're not going to lose at least until the NCAA tournament. If they lose, then right. So Gonzaga fans have a couple of interesting ones coming up, and then they have that schedule. Yes, they have the West Coast Conference schedule that will not be quite as challenging. St. Mary's is a little down this year, not terribly down, but a little down this year. BYU is always BYU, but yeah, they get through Tennessee and North Carolina. It could be a fun year for Gonzaga.
Well, it's going to be interesting because you mentioned you got to see the Duke Auburn game, and it was your first game going start to finish. Well, I finally had a chance to watch I've been watching UVA, but I hadn't got to watch them start to finish until the Wisconsin game. And it was, I thought that was an atypical UVA game. It was a situation to where I don't like the way that the ESPN machine cranks out all the propaganda about Duke. But I equally don't like the way that they badmouth Virginia. It just, even when they're talking about, the Virginia-Wisconsin, and wow, I hope everybody stayed awake. You've got the 2 slowest teams, blah, blah, blah. I'm just sitting there, and it's not one person doing it. Yeah. I'm sitting here, and so, to have 2 teams that I genuinely pull for, and to feel like they're on the opposite ends of the same ugly stick. You didn't see the Duke kids running their mouths. This wasn't the Duke kids saying outrageous things. These weren't the Duke players saying, we're going to go 40-0. It's everybody who has an opinion. And then on the other end of it, I thought that Tony Bennett showed you as much in the Maryland game as he did in the Wisconsin game. On a day where their defense couldn't quite see the big deal the way it might normally do it. Yeah. What did Virginia do? They just outscored them.
Yeah.
And instead of somebody saying, hey, look, Virginia can not only slow you to death, they can actually outscore you. And I think that was one of the problems with, I hate to ever refer back to the Maryland-Baltimore County game, but you're in a situation where that was the first time that Virginia just couldn't clamp somebody. And they had to then try to outscore them. And in the Maryland game, I thought the Maryland win was more impressive than the Wisconsin win.
Yeah, because we've seen that Wisconsin game from Virginia 100 times in the Tony Bennett era. That's they strangle you to death, and if they're missing shots, they just beat you with defense. We haven't seen it as much. Those were 2 very different games back to back against top 25 teams from the Big Ten, and the Maryland game in Maryland, which apologies to Cameron Indoor Stadium, but Maryland, from my experience of watching Virginia play in those 2 arenas, Maryland's tougher to play in because those fans, God love them for this, but they are so vile. They are loud. They're obnoxious. They curse. They're there 2 hours before the game in great numbers, yelling at you, screaming at you, calling you every name in the book. They made me feel sorry for J.J. Redick a few years ago. I talked about it on a podcast earlier this year. I mean, they're vile, but they support their team well. And the way that arena's built, that student section goes straight up from the floor. All that sound comes straight down the floor. It's hard, and that's a tough place to play. And that Maryland team's pretty good. They're young, they're big, they're athletic. Their guards are okay. Their bigs are really good. And so that win was very impressive to me. Plus, as you mentioned, Jerry, Virginia's defense that night was not good, except for the turnovers. Maryland had 14 turnovers. They shot 54% from the floor. They were really eating up Virginia in the post. And Virginia, though, goes and outscores them. So for Virginia to win a game like that, it says a lot about the difference of this team and last year's team. Last year's team had to beat you with defense. This year's team can beat you with defense. They beat Wisconsin with defense. They can also beat you with their offense. And so, there's more tests coming up for Virginia, certainly. I think this team is still a work in progress. They're number 4 in the country, and that's great, but I think they're still a work in progress. Tony's still kind of figuring out who's going to play when and where. Right now he's starting Kihei Clark, the 5'9" freshman from California who had one other scholarship offer, UC Davis, now starting as a freshman for this team. Over Braxton Key, the Alabama transfer that was so ballyhooed and is now reduced to about 10 or 12 minutes a game. So that's going to flesh out differently, I think, as the season goes on. But that said, it was an impressive win the other night. I don't know that we'll see Virginia tested quite that much until ACC play now. I think they're through the tough part of their non-conference schedule. So I don't know what we're going to see in terms of growth from this team between now and ACC play. But that was a great win for Virginia the other night.
Hey, I want to try to sneak in two quick side notes. One just a feel-good story. Ben Humphreys, the senior leader for the Duke defense, he came out against Wake Forest and was basically trying to play on one leg and only played one series. Chris, he has actually been named a finalist for the Lott Impact Trophy. Another ACC player, Christian Wilkins from Clemson. And for those that aren't as familiar with the Lott Impact Trophy, it's an award, of course, named after Ronnie Lott, but it was a situation where it measures integrity, maturity, performance, academics, community, and tenacity. And it's just one of those awards to where just they name a bunch of semifinalists. He's actually made the Final Four on that one. And if you're looking for something for this Sunday to watch on TV, you've got number 1, number 2. You got the UConn Notre Dame showdown on the women's side. It's going to be a fun basketball game. So if you can break away from the NFL for a couple of hours, you're going to get to see the number 1, number 2 matchup on the ladies' side.
Yeah, the NFL's been boring me anyway, so that sounds like a great alternative on Sunday for basketball junkies like ourselves and our listeners out there as well. So. Well, we got a busy week in ACC football still coming up. All the whatever news happens on Monday Sunday and Monday with bowls, whatever other coaching moves there may be. So a lot to catch up with Jerry next week. But I want to thank Jerry for his time this week, and thank you also for listening to our podcast. And remember, go to AugustaFreePress.com for all the news about ACC sports, UVA sports. There's a lot of Duke in there, a lot of UNC in there. We cover the ACC, primarily UVA, but we look at the rest of the ACC too because it all matters. And so, for Jerry Carter, I'm Chris Graham signing off. Have a great week, everybody.